Welcome back to The Documentary Life. This is a show that inspires and informs you on how to best live and lead your own documentary life. If you've been listening since the early days, you might be wondering what this moment is. Is this a comeback? A relaunch? A reboot? Well, it's none of those. This is a recommitment. 5 years ago, this show went quiet. Not because documentary filmmaking stopped mattering, not because the questions were answered, but because, like many of you, I found myself inside the realities this show was always meant to examine. Exhaustion, uncertainty, competing responsibilities, shifting priorities, and the quiet reckoning that happens when creative work collides with real life. I didn't step away because I stopped believing in documentary. I stepped away because I needed to live it. And in those years, making films, raising a family, moving across the world, navigating funding realities, burnout, recommitment, doubt, one thing became increasingly clear. The conversations we weren't having were becoming more important than the ones we were. So this season is not about returning to what the documentary life was. It's about clarifying what it needs to be now. This season is built around a simple, uncomfortable truth that most of what we define as a documentary life is never taught. We are taught how to apply for grants, how to pitch, how to shoot, how to edit, how to market, but we are rarely taught how to decide. How to decide when a story is changed, how to decide when to keep going and when to stop. How to decide what access costs, how to decide how much of yourself a project is allowed to take, how to decide what responsibility looks like after the film is finished, how to decide whether this life, not just this film, is in fact sustainable. This season, it exists inside those questions, not to resolve them, not to provide answers, but to name them, and honestly. You won't find a lot of filmmaking hacks here. There won't be a lot of shortcuts presented. You won't hear certainty masquerading as wisdom. I'm just not that kind of podcaster or YouTuber. What you will hear are filmmaker-to-filmmaker conversations about judgment under constraint. Conversations with filmmakers who have worked independently and inside institutions. Filmmakers who have faced deadlines they didn't agree with. Filmmakers who have found more appropriate formats for their doc filmmaking. Filmmakers who have learned to embrace new technology that others are fearful of. Filmmakers who have lived with the consequences of access. Filmmakers who have been asked to promise impact without being taught how to carry it. This season is not interested in mythology. It is interested in conditions. Because while this life can be exhausting, financially, emotionally, physically, it is also profoundly meaningful. Documentary filmmaking is not a naive choice. It is a deliberate one. It is the decision to pay attention in a world that rewards distraction, to listen when it would be easier to move on, to stay with complexity rather than simplify it for comfort or applause. The costs are real. But so is the value. This work matters because it creates understanding where there was distance, presence where there was silence, and care where indifference would be easier. Choosing to look closely again and again, that is not weakness. It is a form of quiet courage, and it is still a hopeful act. If you're early in your documentary life, this season is not here to discourage you, but it is here to respect you enough not to lie. If you're mid-career and quietly questioning sustainability, well, you're not alone, and you're not failing. If you work as a freelancer, an editor, a hired hand, or inside pre-sold projects with fixed schedules and budgets, you belong here too. Constraint does not disqualify you from authorship. Often, it reveals it. And if you've been carrying a project longer than you ever imagined, wondering why no one prepared you for this part, this season was made with you in mind. This show is edited with restraint. Conversations are focused. Questions are deliberate. Because clarity matters. We're not trying to say everything. We're trying to say what's essential. And sometimes what's essential is simply the willingness to stay with uncertainty long enough to make a responsible choice. Before we begin, I want to say something very clearly. Thank you. During the 5 years this show was quiet, I continued to receive emails, messages, and notes from documentary filmmakers from around the world. People who found the show in my absence and people who had been listening since the beginning. I never forgot those messages. I never forgot those voices. And I never stopped carrying the responsibility they implied. This season exists because you kept listening, because you kept asking questions, and you kept making the work, often without applause, certainty, or permission. So I would like you to consider this my recommitment to this show, to you, the listener, and to documentary as a practice of care, judgment, and attention, and not performance. Now look, I don't know where every episode will land. I don't know which conversations will resonate most, but I do know this. The documentary life is back because the work is unfinished, and because the most important questions don't go away just because we stop recording. Thank you for being here. Let's begin. There was a moment back in 2019, about the time when I was winding down the podcast, although I didn't realize that at the time, and we were still filming on Elvis of Cambodia. We were entering our 7th year on the film. I was sitting at my desk, staring out at the window of our apartment. The mango trees were swaying in a slight breeze, the fruit a heavy emerald green. Our family of 4 was living in Siem Reap, Cambodia, and we had run out of money. Not like things were tight, not things are getting a little uncomfortable. I'm talking we were a month away from not being able to pay rent. A month away from not being able to cover our kids' schooling. We had already exhausted everything, including another Kickstarter campaign. And on top of that, and this is not an easy one to admit, we were carrying years of debt from making the film. And I remember sitting at that desk realizing I had to do something I didn't want to do. I had to go back to a donor, someone who was also a friend, and ask for more money. And I remember sitting with that decision and feeling something I hadn't felt before. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't even the anxiety of asking for more money. It was deeper than that. This was disillusionment. Because up to that point, I had been living one version of this life publicly and a very different version privately. On the podcast, I was talking about the documentary life, about how it was possible, and how you could build something meaningful doing this work. But in that moment, trying to figure out how to keep a roof over my family's head, it all rang hollow. I wasn't thinking about story. I wasn't thinking about impact. I was thinking about rent, about my kids' schooling, about whether I was actually doing right by my kids. And I remember very clearly resenting the film. Resenting the years it had taken, resenting the debt, resenting the version of this life I thought I had signed up for. And that was the moment something shifted for me. Because I realized the business of documentary filmmaking, the part we don't talk about enough, isn't really about deals or funding strategies. It's about survival. It's about whether you can stay in this work long enough to keep making it without losing everything else in the process. And that is a very different question. It's not, how do I make this film? It's, how do I build a life where making films is actually sustainable? And I don't want to sit here and pretend that I solved that in that moment. I didn't. What I did do was start taking that question seriously. Not as something abstract, but as something real. Something that had consequences for my family, for my work, for whether I could even continue doing this at all. And over time, it wasn't overnight, that changed the way I saw this life. It made me less interested in the mythology of documentary filmmaking and more interested in the conditions that actually allow it to continue. And that's why I wanted to begin this season here, with the business of being a documentary filmmaker. Not the surface version of it, but what it actually takes to stay in the work over time. Because if you're going to live a documentary life, and I believe you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you weren't, you have to find a way to keep going. Before we get to today's conversation, I wanted to let you know about something I've put together that I genuinely wish someone had handed me when I first started making documentaries. It's called the Documentary Life Field Guide, a collection of lessons, reflections, and practical insights drawn from more than 25 years of making nonfiction films. It's about storytelling, sustainability, funding, interviews, creative life, and learning how to build a life around documentary filmmaking that's both meaningful and sustainable. Now, you can download it for free by visiting thedocumentarylife.com. Just enter your email address and I'll send it straight to your inbox. And remember, stories matter, listening matters, human connection matters. Ondi Timoner is an internationally acclaimed filmmaker known for chronicling bold, impossible visionaries. She is the only director to win the Sundance Grand Jury Prize twice for Dig and We Live in Public, both later acquired into MoMA's permanent collection. Her films span culture, technology, politics, and intimate personal stories, including Last Flight Home, The New Americans, Gaming a Revolution, and All the Walls Came Down, her rapid response documentary about the Los Angeles fires. Her work consistently bridges the personal and the societal, often anticipating cultural shifts around privacy, media, and collective identity. A recipient of the Visionary Award for Documentary Excellence, she also serves as chair of nonfiction for special projects at the Directors Guild of America. Ondi, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation for the Documentary Life.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
So, Ondi, sort of to start this sort of arc of this particular episode, my first question I like to kind of call naming the gap. And what I mean by that is it's this idea of, why I would ask you, Ondi, why so many filmmakers reach mid-career before realizing, that we're never taught how to sustain a life in documentary. We're taught how to finish a film, but not how to sustain our lives. Can you talk a bit about that?
I don't really know if I was taught anything about being a documentary filmmaker. Nobody urged me to take on this career. This is not something that came from film school. I didn't go to film school. I went to undergraduate at Yale, and they had no production facilities. They had no, really film program at that time. And I'm dating myself, but, we're talking about 1990 to 1994. And
machines.
yeah,
The nonlinear editing. Yeah.
But they didn't even have that. A public access station, luckily for me, opened my sophomore year. It was called Citizens Television, which I love the name. And I went with my brother to the first meeting, and we got a little lesson on how to use the shuttle editing system. And they said, you can work here, but the only thing that you need to promise is that we get to show whatever it is that you make.
Oh.
And I was like, this is a great bonus.
Great.
Sounds good. I'll show whatever I make. I'm not sure they were happy about that, because I ended up making this show called what was it called? High Street 06511, which was my zip code, and it was a ripoff of Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah.
Starring all my friends. So I did scripted stuff, and then I also started going into documentaries and made a film. I said to all the professors, I'll make a film. I'll take your class if you let me make a film instead of write a final paper. And so I
did
took
the same thing. I did the same.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Independent
As if
study.
they
Yep.
cared if I took their class. It was so funny. But
Yep.
I ended up making 5 documentaries senior year for 5 classes. And one of them
that's so cool.
was called Voices from Inside Time. And it was about women in prison, and about I felt like I was freeing some part of them when I drove past the prison walls, the tapes in the back seat. They were in this parallel universe supported by our taxpaying dollars, but now maybe their voices or their souls on some level, their story would be out there, and a bridge of compassion could be formed. And I was so moved by that I that was my that was my entry love affair, if you will, with documentary. And then really
Yeah.
got married to it was this one woman I met there. And I ended up telling her story and staying after I graduated. And people said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "I'm going to go make documentaries." And they were like, "What?" They looked at me like, "What is that?" You know?
Right.
And they were all heading to like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. And there was no career in documentaries whatsoever when I started. And
Mm-mm.
that's kind of why I look at, these trends today of this, it's the golden age. Oh my God, the bottom's fallen out. Like AI is here. There's no, the streamers have destroyed it. Like I get it. There's reality to it. The streamers have destroyed the ecosystem to some extent. There is just no way to compete at this point with these flash documentaries. There'll be 7 films made about the Epstein files in 10 minutes, and the
Oh,
revenue
you know it. Yeah.
make something, else that might be worth seeing are going to have a hard time finding that real estate. But at the same time, like I've been through so much of it in the last 33 years that I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't apply to me, and that's not true, but it is true
Mm.
because no one can stop you from making your movies. It's not like you need permission. And I think I've never asked for permission. I've never been hired by a streamer. I've made my entire career independently. And so I don't
Mm.
know. I couldn't tell you exactly how every single film has been made differently.
Yeah.
And it's certainly gotten easier with my success in that people know that I'm going to finish the film. They know that
Yes.
people are going to look at the film. Like there's things that I get, for having done this for this long and been all right at it that young kids today won't have that advantage. And I feel for everyone, but I
Mm.
have to tell you that I started out just making music videos or making electronic press kits for bands. I got nominated for a Grammy when I was 27, and when they called, I said, "I think you made some sort of mistake. I make films. I appreciate the call." And they were like, "Oh, no, 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 you made this EPK about this band, and it's nominated for best long form music video."
No way.
Yeah, I mean, crazy stuff like that where I didn't submit it, and there it was. And then I was
Wow.
going to the Grammys, and then I was able to get more work, and I put all that money into Dig,
Yeah.
and my brother and I would just like do shifts on the Avid. I felt like I discovered God in the Avid, but it was always for the sake of doing it, and just for the passion of it. And so I always advise people, and I feel like a lot of people are in it for the business today. And I would
Yeah.
say, well, then find another job, because I don't know that that's the way to go. If you love discovering and learning using a camera and sharing what you've learned, and you get, a rise out of that, like then stay in it,
Yeah.
I think. But business, I don't know what to say. Like, yeah.
Somebody
Although
is
I guess we're going
somebody
to talk
is
about it this entire hour. So.
well, yeah, I was gonna say, somebody is giving you the wrong career advice if you're simply doing it because you want a business. Yeah, it's sort of along those lines in I guess myth breaking. Why does the industry and does the industry, in your opinion, still sell the idea, that one film can change everything? There's a multi-picture deal after that, and what actually happens when it doesn't?
Well, that actually happened to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I did work for 7 years
Mm,
out of college and even more. So 23, I started making Dig, and I didn't finish it till I was 30.
yeah.
Um, and I thanked my son, who was 11 weeks old, who had been carried out of the racket club at Sundance when I won the Grand Jury Prize for Dig. I thanked my son for the deadline I couldn't push because I probably wouldn't have finished the film if I had
Right.
added this deadline. I was like, I
Yeah.
cannot bring this rock saga into motherhood. Like those two things cannot
Wow.
be together. So that's
Yeah.
why I finished it, because I would have gone on probably. Even at the premiere, I had notes and took notes during the premiere, and my hands were sweating, and then it was like a standing ovation. But I feel like then again, the next film was about Bush won the election Bush Jr. And like his entire thing was predicated on a lie that, the war in Iraq was predicated on a lie. The economy was in the dumps. So I was like, there must be some kind of mind control in America. So I made this movie called Join Us, which I was sure would be, a no-brainer after Dig, but I had no
Mm.
idea about the marketplace because I was, I just hadn't been looking around, and probably similar to my answer on your first question was like, I just don't really look around that much because I just feel like that kind of competitive paralleling, it's never where I get my inspiration from. My inspiration
Mm.
comes from the work and my subjects. So and nature, and like love. And so I just I don't know, like I like to read. I'm as a member of the Academy, I get the trades whether I want them or not. But I actually like some of the articles about, being a director or what an actor's experience is because I do scripted as well. But overall, I don't think staying up on that stuff is
Mm.
good for me personally and my process.
Beneficial to you for personally.
Yeah, I'm too busy actually, like
Right,
working
right,
on my films that nobody asked me to make.
right.
Which in my model has always been to go sell them. But in the case of Join Us, which I was telling you about, I was sure, oh, this is a no-brainer. I got access to a mind control clinic where they save people from mind control and deprogram them. And
Right.
to the man who discovered what the eight, tenets of mind control are by studying prisoners of war in China, who was at Harvard and is probably passed now. And I made this film that was awesome, and I was like, wow, this is going to be my follow-up to Dig. And then I premiered it at the LA Film Festival to change it up, having no idea that there was no market at that festival and that you have to premiere at one of three festivals in order to sell a movie. Like, no
Wow.
idea about that stuff, And
Yep,
then
yep, yep.
and I remember Trevor Groth at Sundance being like, "Well, why didn't you wait for us?" And I was like, I didn't even think about it. I just thought, "Oh, I'm
Didn't know
finishing
that
now.
that's what,
I'm in
yeah,
LA. This is going to be awesome." We had
yeah.
this huge, beautiful premiere at the Crest Cinema, and then it was like crickets. And then I found out from my attorney at the time that there was this like list of topics and themes that distributors share that are kind of like we're not going to go there. And one of them that
Taboo.
yeah was religion. And I was like, but this is even a film about religion. It's about mind control. But I guess Jesus Camp and Deliver Us from Evil had premiered that year, and
Yeah.
both had not done well at the box office, although they both have, in my opinion, have stood the test of time.
Oh, yeah.
But they weren't going to buy any more films about hard stop. And because
Wow.
the cult leader was a pastor, they weren't going to buy it. And so that was my first experience of like, oh, you're a Sundance Grand Jury Prize winner, but you can't sell your movie, And then I finally did
Wow.
to Sundance Channel for like, and I had put my own money in, Chris, because I was like,
Mm.
oh, well, I made money off Dig, and I guess I'll just go sell this. I'll go finance this. I'll put my
Totally.
money where I had funded Dig and I made money owning it. And so I was like, okay, well, let me do this again. So then, then Sundance Channel aired it. And the day after, we got an offer from MSNBC for like 150K, which would have been most of my money back, and couldn't take it because it had aired the day before. And so I was just like, okay, I guess this is how it goes. And it was a big learning for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just kept doing what I'm doing, and I had been making this film called We Live in Public at the same time as Dig. And I was waiting for society and technology to catch up to the vision of We Live in Public. And then
Mm.
as I was finishing Join Us, I saw on Facebook the first notification I'd ever seen. I'm driving west on the freeway, posted 2 hours ago or something, and I thought, oh my God, is something wrong? Like, what is that? Like all it
Wow.
was a person announcing that they were going to Santa Monica, and I thought, oh my God, who cares? And then all these people wrote back. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think the bunker that I've documented in We Live in Public is actually coming true with the
Wow.
internet now, and the vision is coming. And I had like this lightning strike, and I finished We Live in Public, and Sundance took it within like 2 days of me sending it in a month late
Mm,
or something. And
mm,
I remember I sent it in on Halloween and it was in the festival by like the 2nd of November.
mm,
And then it won again by unanimous jury. And that solidified my standing as a filmmaker. That
mm.
like that. So it wasn't one film that did it, I guess was the
Yep,
answer. Right? It was two.
yep, yep.
But that in turn has sort of damned me from winning anything else or being nominated for an Oscar or anything like that. Because it's just like, I think it's always like, well, she won Sundance twice and no one else did type of thing. And that's 17 years ago now. But it's that kind of thing where it's just kind of like, it's a double-edged sword and that's fine.
Mm.
It is my life. And I'm grateful for whatever. So.
If you're anything like me, you know that making a documentary can sometimes feel like a very solitary pursuit. Projects can take years to complete, and yes, I know what that feels like. Momentum comes and goes, and some of the biggest creative decisions are often made without a trusted group of peers to bounce ideas off of. That's exactly why I created the Documentary Life Mastermind. It's a small, supportive group of documentary filmmakers who meet each week to share projects, work through creative and production challenges, receive honest feedback, and stay accountable to the stories they're trying to tell. So whether you're in development, production, editing, or simply just figuring out what comes next, you'll be surrounded by fellow nonfiction storytellers who understand both the rewards and the realities of this work. We're currently accepting applications for our August cohort. And because the groups are intentionally kept small, I'd encourage you to apply if it feels like the right fit. And you can learn more and submit a brief application by visiting barongfilms.com/mastermind. I'd love to learn more about you and the story you're working to bring into the world. Andy, you strike me as somebody, who has rebuilt your approach not only to filmmaking, but I think into the way in which you make choices in your life, the way you lead your life. I think you're somebody who's rebuilt your approach more than once. So my question to you is, what usually forces this sort of reinvention? Is it ambition? Is it exhaustion? Necessity? What forces a reinvention in your life, whether it's with film or filmmaking or.
I'm actually trying to reinvent now my
Mm,
work-life balance.
mm,
I'm actually, have you're talking to me from Joshua Tree, California, where I live now with my wife and composer Morgan Doctor, who scored my last 8 films, and
well,
we have an incredible working relationship, like a great collaboration, and it's really funny because we used to live in Altadena in a beautiful home that I felt so grateful to live there and loved my town so much. And it burned down the whole town and the house in January of last year in the LA fires. And so that in and of itself is a forced reinvention.
yes.
You know,
It's
I
like
got
it's like you knew where my segue was going, Andy. How dare you?
the old Marie Kondo trick. I got
Yeah.
that times 1 million trillion, where I had no choice in the matter and
Oh boy.
everything is gone because I was in Europe filming a movie about the Holocaust, which
Yeah.
talking to you from my Avid. I am literally finishing a cut by tomorrow. Um, and really,
Fantastic.
really, really proud of it. Yeah, it's something that I have felt that I should do for a long time as a Jewish person. And, you probably know if you've seen Last Flight Home about
Yeah.
my sister, Rachel Timoner, and that film there, All God's Children, is about,
Children. Yeah.
yeah, All God's Children, if you're listening to this, is about, and not watching because I just pointed at a poster.
That's right. That's right.
That happened to exist because it was in New York, by the way. All of these are
Yeah.
like donated from people that happen to have
Oh, are they amazing?
memorabilia because
Yeah.
I lost
They would have to be.
all my stuff. Yeah. But yeah, my sister had to tell me that there's spiritual, that I was crying in my movie All the Walls Came Down, the new one
Yeah.
about the fires. I was actually weeping
Yeah.
about my lost things, and some of them that I can't replace, like the cards from my son and the love letters, and especially the scrapbooks of my father, who will have passed 5 years ago on Tuesday, March 3rd, and he's the subject of my film Last Flight Home, which is easily the most important film I've made. Um, but anyway, she tells me,
Yeah.
there is spiritual, that we surround ourselves by the things that we value. And in this case,
Right.
I didn't
Right.
have a chance to pull any of them out since the fire happened when we were in Europe.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so anyway, it's fast forward to a year and a half later, and I'm actually trying, not even a year and a couple months later, and I'm trying to finally take time to make the films even slower.
Mm,
And these last few, I mean, I've put out like, and my wife has been like, "Can you stop making two films at once?"
really?
And I said, "Well, can you stop these traumatic things from happening to me?" And it's not like I consciously processed my trauma this way. It was that with Last Flight Home, I didn't mean to make a film. I was actually filming my dad to not forget a single word he said. And I set up four cameras. And it's like at this point, documentary filmmaking is like a second language to me. So I realized I was having this nervous breakdown because he was going to do medical aid in dying, and there was going to be a limited time he was here. And it was about this time,
Mm,
actually, no, it was about last month. Now, February, what is it? February 26th. I would have
mm,
been filming this 5 years ago. Um, I would have been filming Last Flight Home because it was January 28th. He went to the hospital and he said he suddenly was begging to die. And he's like the most tenacious person I'd ever known. And he was the rock of my life. And yet he had been paralyzed for 40 years from an accidental stroke that happened as a result of his neck being cracked at my age now, which is I'm 53, and I feel pretty vital at 53. I don't feel too old yet, so that really put it in perspective for me being 53 this year. But I had always written a script about his airline, the rise and fall of the airline he created, and the discrimination of his stroke and him being pushed out of the airline and bankrupted. And like that, I had been working on. And I was even reading that to him in his final days. I set
mm.
up cameras just to not forget a single word he said because I was 9 when he had that
Wow.
stroke. And I can't remember him able-bodied. So I was terrified.
Uh,
So I was using the cameras as a tool to not forget anything. And but what happened was so profound through that 2 week period,
yeah.
2.5 week period, from like beginning of end of January, beginning of February till March 3rd when he passed.
Mm,
Uh, and that became a memorial video and then spiraled into a feature film called Last Flight Home. And I have no idea where I was going with that. Oh yeah. So I was making two films at once because I was also making the New Americans Gaming and Revolution at that time, which I had committed to make.
right.
And so then that happened, and then All God's Children and the in between, about the only hospice for the homeless, happened. And the All God's Children is about my sister and this partnership with this black pastor to
Yeah.
stop racism and anti-Semitism in Brooklyn. And that was like 5 years in the making. And if one more thing didn't happened, I couldn't make it a feature anymore. Like because the war broke out, October 7th happened, and
Yeah.
it was just like too many things were happening, and I was like, this is not going to fit anymore in a feature. So I had to finish that and the in between at the same time. And so then now I pushed my next film. All of this to say, Chris, I pushed my next
Yeah.
film. I
Yeah.
shooting for all of 2024, which is called All That We Are. And it's about this couple that are fighting cancer at the same time that they're adapting Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, also about the Holocaust.
Wow.
And also about really a modern man's search for meaning, about the meaning of life and death. Very much inspired by, in fact, they came to me. They're Leslie Patterson, this five-time world champion triathlete, who wrote All Quiet on the Western Front with her husband,
Mm-hmm.
Marshall,
Mm-hmm.
had won every award. And as they were deciding to adapt their favorite book ever, Man's Search for Meaning, as they were able to get that opportunity from Tony
Wow.
Robbins of all people, he gets diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And they came
Mm,
because of Last Flight Home to document. And I accepted reluctantly because I knew that it would have mean turning my entire life over to it. And Morgan, my wife, supported it. And so we went off and we shot 200 days all over Europe. And and the world, and in 10 countries. And then when the fire happened, I was like, you know what? I got to stop making two films at the same time. And then I did. I made two films again at the same time. All the walls came down had to happen fast and urgently. As you said, it was a rapid response film
Yeah. Yeah.
situation in which my town is at risk and of losing everything. Many of my neighbors are losing their property that they've lived on forever, their generational land. It was the second largest black home ownership in the country. 80% of people own their own land. And if I didn't make a short right away, I wasn't really doing my part, I felt like, as a
Mm.
filmmaker of the neighborhood.
Yeah. Of
You know,
course.
there
Of
are
course.
other ones, other filmmakers, but I felt like my job was to do that, to film from the moment I came home because of Last Flight Home, because I didn't know I was making a film at the time. And I thought, well, if there is some message here, something to share, some important thing that I have to share, if I don't film from the moment I come home, I won't have anything. And so we shot for 71 days. My nephew, Eli Timoner, joined me. It was named
Yeah.
after my dad. And my brother's house also burned down, and that became all the walls came down. And I've talked for way too long now. But the point is, we now share a same studio. My wife is just off camera there, scoring right now, probably
Oh, wow.
and we've pushed all that we are to right after this. So we're finishing this movie about the Holocaust, which is for Legendary, actually. It's tentatively called The Central Office, and it's about the very last office that does the investigation of nationalist socialist crimes, and I mean the very last case, and
Wow.
this central office that you've never heard of, which is quite a interesting outfit, and it's just about the last trial and everything. So
Well, Andy, I'd like to talk to you a bit about this idea of identity. And I think you've been getting to some of this here and in some of the conversations with talking about the various films you've done in the past, decade plus. And now I'm talking about more recent films, and at times dealing with subject material that you're, as we do as doc filmmakers, completely sort of immerse ourselves in, dare I say, lose ourselves in. And so I want to talk to you about identity with our films. How do you think, how do doc filmmakers how do we disentangle our identity from the films that we are working on through the course of when we're working on them and then afterwards when we're finished with that film?
well, there was an outsider artist named Frank Bruno. I don't know if he's alive or not, but I remember a quote because at one point I was going to collaborate with my dear friend Jody Willie, who was a book publisher at that point and became a filmmaker who made The Source Family. If you haven't seen that, about The Source Family, great film. But anyway, she at that time it was the 90s, and we were going to collaborate and on a book about outsider artists called The End Is Near. And Frank Bruno, I interviewed him, and he said, all of my paintings are my dumb children. And that came to mind when you asked that question. I mean, they're all my children, they're all
Yeah.
my children. And I don't
We
know.
don't disentangle from our children, do we?
No, I mean,
It's
they're
not like
all
that.
here. They're all, and you know what? They're all, not all of them. Even Maplethorpe, which I
Yeah.
recommend the director's
Narrative.
cut online. That's a whole other conversation we could have about the difference between the two cuts. But anyway, Maplethorpe is a scripted film that I wrote because he's
Yeah.
dead, and I don't make films generally about dead people.
Mm.
Um, Mostly, if I do make a film about a dead person, there's a lot of living people in the film. And
Yes.
it's not talking heads. And I don't make talking head films very much. I make verite films mostly. So I wanted to make the story of Maplethorpe because I make films about people who push the boundaries and don't take
Yes.
no for an answer and can't help but do what they do. I call them impossible visionaries.
That's right.
But yeah, with Maplethorpe, I just was like, yeah, I had to tell it. But even with that one, there are living beings that are part of the work. So it's not just dumb children. It's children that are still living, and you have to honor them. So people want clips of them, or they want
Mm.
footage. This one band that I filmed in the making of Dig was 10 bands at first. So there's 10 bands that I have the footage of, and
Mm.
you know and my brother, who's my partner in Dig, and cut the latest one, Dig Double X, the new one, the 20th anniversary version. He would go very generously to the office and get these bands their footage. Like there's moments like that where you
Mm,
just have to be a responsible person because these people gave you their time, and you need to respect them no matter how much they may disrespect you, like
yeah.
Anton or something like that. You know how he's
Mm.
been towards me in the years since Dig and towards my brother and my family. It's
Ah,
uncalled for, it's inappropriate, but he's unstable and it's fine. It's like whatever. It's
yeah.
part of the story of Dig.
It
It
is
just,
right.
it is what it is. You try not to take it personally, and just mind your side of the street. And identity wise, you got to take in the fact that you are the person that made these films, and so you have to fall on the sword of them. Whatever you did, whatever
Mm,
you said, whatever you put in there, that's what you did at that
mm.
time. I remember Russell Brand, who I made the film Brand: A Second Coming about, and he's going through his own mess right now that we didn't
Certainly
cover.
is.
Though
Yeah.
film is a great film to watch if you're interested in his history, because he did suffer from sex addiction and he knew that. But he wanted to demand changes to the film. I had final say because I had six directors behind me when I was asked to make the film, which he
Mm,
asked me to make the film. He begged me to make the film, and I
mm,
would not accept until I got final cut, because prior directors were the likes of Al Maisels,
mm.
Oliver Stone, Clay Twiel, like really, really, really good directors, and somehow the film had never gotten made. And I was like, look, I'm going to start from scratch, but I have to have final say. But even still, it was invited to open South by Southwest, the first doc in a decade to do so. And
Mm.
he made all these demands of changes to make. And whatever were things, and this is to answer your question, were things
Yeah.
that I felt he said to me privately or even in a sit down interview, even if they made the film better. Like they were things that he said to me in a sit down interview. For example, he was on MSNBC and he did this hilarious, amazing, turn on the interview viewers of Morning Joe on set.
Mm.
And he told me that he could twist the energy in the room, and he did this magical thing. And he told me about what he did, and I included it, and it was perfect in the doc. And
I'll
then
bet.
he demanded I take it out. But because he had told me that in a sit down to just me, I honored that. He
Ah,
also he told me to take out the footage of him and Katy Perry the morning after their wedding when they're sitting by like a dirty pond in India with no makeup on. And it's the most real, authentic thing.
yeah, yeah,
And I said, why would you want people to
yeah.
not realize that you had an authentic relationship? And he demanded I take it out. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? That's your footage. I got to take it out.
Mm.
But then he wanted a joke taken out that he had performed on stage. And I was like, you can't take it back. You performed
No,
that in front of
no.
an audience.
Yeah,
That's the decision you made at that time. And we just
yeah.
have to own who we were throughout our lives and the decisions we made,
Ah,
choices we made. And so I distinguish myself as a mother, a daughter, a sister, and I try to keep all of those roles, and a wife. And I'd probably go mother, wife, daughter, sister in that priority. These
mm-hmm.
days, I mean, my son always, I'll always pick
Number
up the
one.
call and make sure that he's alive. And then I'll
Yeah.
ask him to call him back, maybe, or join his therapy session about why my work has been so intense throughout his life. And he loves it, but he has a very challenging relationship with it, like where he feels challenged
Uh,
by my career. And so
uh,
anything I can do to help with that, because I do feel bad, but I did take him a lot of places with me, and those are precious memories that we
that's
share.
right.
But I worked really hard, and yeah, sharing. And then my wife obviously gets my attention now, and my mother, who's still alive, and then my sibs. But the T team lives on, as we call it. My personal life is super important to me, and
But
I think
Andy,
he. Yeah.
Andy, what's very, very interesting for me to note is you didn't say doc filmmaker or filmmaker in those identities.
Because I'm on the planet for that reason. So, like all the other roles that I mentioned are other roles that we might have as humans
Hmm.
outside of documentary filmmaking. But for some reason, telling
Mm.
these stories is something that I can't help but do, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not something that it's like, and I have to tell them well. I mean, like I'll throw myself to the absolute wall. I've I've probably pulled 500 plus all-nighters in my career. I'm not happy about that. It means
Yeah.
a few years less probably.
Yeah.
Uh, and I know that, you know, I used to rest on the monitors on the stage and use them as a tripod to hold my camera. You know, like stuff that's just ridiculous now for my
Yeah.
53-year-old body is like, no,
Yeah.
why would you do
I
that?
know.
You know? But I still have that energy. I still
Yeah.
have that energy for the work. I just want to make sure to preserve it. So I'm back to that, working on, you know, now pushing all that we are so that, you know, central office can get my attention right now. Then that can get my attention. I'm
Mm.
doing an adaptation of We Live in Public that for the scripted that I actually have investment to do. And I'm going to write that also just as its own part of my schedule, like not
Mm.
trying for me to do one thing at a time, even, and then spend hours in meditation, writing, walking in nature, as I say, studying the rocks and the sky right now. It's not retirement, it's literally self preservation. I think it's
Mm.
just because I have been so in it. You know, I had a show about documentaries for 6 years that I hosted called BYOD, Bring Your Own Doc, and
Yeah.
covered 300 other films while making all of these films, you know, and so
Right.
it's been like a lot. So if I could
Yeah.
slow it down, and I don't know if I know how to do that yet, Chris, or how I could advise on that, but I think the
Yeah.
move to Joshua Tree and the fire and taking that as like an offering, if you will, an
Yes. Yes.
opportunity to rejigger and figure out if I can, you know, do this, where I step outside. And I always think walking, I really recommend to everyone listening that you take a walk every day, unless it's
Yeah.
raining, in which case, you know, like sit in meditation or do something to just be quiet for 10, 15, 20 minutes if you can. And nature is the best. You know, even if you go to the gym, I'm not much of a gym person, but nature, anything you can do outside will, as Robert Redford said in his final words of
Mm.
wisdom, will return you to yourself, will give you some message. Trust those messages that you hear is your own, they'll come through in your own voice, but they might be from somebody who you love that has passed. They might be from nature, but they will steer you and away from keyboard, you know, AFK, like you will get so
Okay.
much wisdom if you actually step away from the work. Like even last night, I couldn't sleep from like 4 in the morning to 5:30 a.m., which I don't recommend, but it happened, and happens to people, especially my age. But we've noticed, my wife and I compare notes on this. But so we,
We're the
because
same.
like
I'm 54. I'm 54, so we're pretty
that
close in
happened to you
age.
too.
Yeah.
So that happened to you too? But it never happened to me. Like I'm so exhausted that I should be sleeping fine, and I usually
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was up and you know, I had ideas about the edit I'm doing. I'm an editor. I also recommend that as like to every director listening, stop whatever
Always.
you're doing. Like you must know how to edit. I
Yes.
don't know how my friends, and I have some esteemed colleagues that don't do their own editing. I don't know. I work with other editors and I love that too. And
Yep.
I love when I have a budget to have an editing partner who,
Right.
but editing, if I didn't have it, most of what you've seen of mine wouldn't exist. Certainly not in the shape it's in. And
Mm.
I just think it's my greatest asset. And it's a double-edged sword. I also feel very trapped by it. And I can, you know, you can get sucked into the Avid and not come out for 15 hours. And I remember
Or
on break
15 years.
15. Yeah. So it's very important to like mind that
Yeah.
addiction. Um, which I'm not going to tell you that I know how to do yet. I'm a workaholic in recovery, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would say I don't even know where I was going with it. Hopefully, that's a lot of good advice.
Andy, what a fantastic conversation. It's been an absolute delight. I mean, my final question was, what does a sustainable documentary life actually look like in practice? And what does it not look like? And I feel like you answered both of those very, very well in the last 10 minutes.
I
There's
mean,
no need to ask that question.
I guess I have one, you know. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
I'm still
fantastic.
making films, at least for now. And I don't, I mean, I am a little bit burned out, but I think what I explained to you that I'm trying to do now is really helping. Another thing
Yeah.
we're doing is Adventure Day, which is very easy
Oh,
to practice if you step out your front door in Joshua Tree, but just trying to
yeah.
take a day off to actually just go out into the world and do something you haven't done before. Make
Yeah.
sure that keep that discovery strong because you'll bring that again, you'll have revelations away from keyboard. And that's what I was saying. Last night I had these amazing ideas of what I needed to finish off this film, like what sound bites I needed to fill in that last piece of the
Oh,
puzzle. And
yeah.
I turn over and I write it in my phone quickly in
Right.
notes
Yeah.
because otherwise I'll sit there and try to not forget it.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's my technique. But, you guys will all find your own. And I wish you all luck on your journey and bless you for telling these stories. We tell the truth beneath the headlines and provide bridges of compassion into worlds that other people might never otherwise enter. And so it's a blessed path you're taking. It's a very hard path, but I don't regret any of it, any of it. Very enriching.
It's been a blessing, this conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today on the Documentary Life. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Chris, and for this wonderful hour.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find the show notes for this episode along with links and resources we discussed at thedocumentarylife.com. And if you haven't yet downloaded the Documentary Life Field Guide, you'll find that there too. It's a free resource designed to help you become a stronger documentary storyteller. And if you're looking for a supportive community of fellow documentary filmmakers to help you stay accountable, gain creative feedback, and keep your project moving forward, applications are currently open for the Documentary Life Mastermind. You can learn more and apply at barongfilms.com/mastermind. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love to continue it over on YouTube. Just search for The Documentary Life, where you'll find episode clips, conversations, and more. And if you enjoy what we're building there, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, remember, stories matter, listening matters, human connection matters.